Welcome into College Corner, as today we're previewing the national championship game between Michigan and Washington out in Houston. Awesome semifinal games. Appreciate everybody for checking out those two videos and the previews there. We heard from so many of you guys. A lot of people not agreeing with us, a lot of people agreeing with us. Looking forward to hearing from you guys in the comment section below down in this one as well. We'll be getting into what to expect from each of these offenses when they have the ball. Players need to know, injury updates that we've seen from the weekend's games, and ultimately a pick on who's going to win this game and some player props brought to you by props.cash. Shout out to them for sponsoring today's video. If you hadn't have the chance to check them out, awesome player prop tool to be able to help you when you're looking to bet on any of these college football games, college basketball, NBA, NHL, NFL. They have all of it for you. We'll get into what they're about a little bit later, but very, very exciting matchup. Two teams, that are undefeated on the season. And, if we still had the BCS style, these would probably be the two teams playing for a national title as well. And we get exactly that. But one thing I think is really interesting, we talked about this actually in our video, we were previewing the semifinal, is there's a chance to be breaking, if you know Bud Elliott from CBS and the Cover 3 podcast talks about this blue chip ratio he came up with, where basically what it means is if you're recruited, over 50% of your recruits in the last 4 years are 4 stars and 5 stars. You're a blue chip team, and those are the teams that win national titles. And since he's created it, only those blue chip teams have won national titles. Washington is one of the teams that does not fill out the blue chip ratio, but could potentially find themselves as national champions with that elite quarterback play from Michael Penix. Michigan, meanwhile, looking to win their first national championship since 1997. And what I can't wait to talk about and makes this game so interesting is the contrasting of styles that makes this such a fascinating matchup. Michigan listed as a 4.5-point favorite in this game, and you're seeing more of the betting action coming in on Washington as of right now, about 60% of the bets I'm seeing. And that's not surprising because Kalen DeBoer's team, he's 5-0 with UW as an underdog. Not 5-0 against the spread, 5-0 straight up. They've won every game as an underdog with Kalen DeBoer as the head coach. Total listed at 55.5. Now, look at the total at 55.5. I think I've seen some people, and you're seeing it through the betting splits, a lot of people liking the over in this game, over 70% of bets, money coming in on this over. And I think some people, from what I've heard, and what I can't completely disagree with, is seeing this as potentially similar to that semifinal game Michigan had against TCU last year, where we saw a litany of points crushing the total that was listed in that game. Now, what I want to start with off of that talk on the total is let's start with Michigan having the football. What are we going to expect from them offensively, and what can Washington answer with defensively? Well, I think the focus is going to be, and when you're looking at this total, is Michigan is going to be fighting to win that time of possession battle, something that Texas did not do nearly well enough against Washington in the semifinal Sugar Bowl game. Those turnovers and those fumbles had something to do with it, but Penix and this offense managed to stay on the field, move the chains, and just have the ball for a vast majority of this game. With Michigan's offense, that's going to be a real struggle for Washington to be able to do so, because this is a Michigan team that likes to run the football and runs it, of course, very well with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. This is a team running the ball in almost 60% of plays. And honestly, this run game should be very, very good in this game. That is my biggest concern with this Washington defense, is how they've struggled against the run. You look at the matchup with Texas in the Sugar Bowl, Texas ran for 180 yards on the ground, averaged almost 6.5 yards per carry. Now, they got away from that, which I don't think they should have done, or way too early in this game, and also trailing in that game. They really couldn't run the ball as much as they wanted to. But the reason that I have such big concern here for Washington defensively is their run defense ranking 125th in opponent EPA per rush, allowing 5 yards per carry. And look, there's some talent in that front four, with Braylon Trice, but they're not doing enough at the line of scrimmage and winning enough at the line of scrimmage. If you're not doing that against this Michigan offensive line, you're going to have some problems. Washington ranks 131st in stuff rate this season. They're just 13.6%. They're not making enough plays at the line of scrimmage against the run and keeping teams behind the chains. I think this is something that Michigan will use to their advantage as well in the passing game. If they're running the ball effectively, you're going to see opportunities to open up and take some shots in the passing game. Something that Washington has also been a little bit susceptible to. 39.7% completion percentage from opposing quarterbacks on passes of 20-plus air yards. That's 104th in the country. 27 total completions allowed on these 20-plus air yard passes, which is 125th in the country. Now, JJ McCarthy, I was at the Rose Bowl. You've probably seen the hat. I was at the Rose Bowl. I was very disappointed in JJ McCarthy's performance. Now, I know we're going to have Washington fans, Michigan fans watching this. Look, I have no bias. I was at the game. I bet on Michigan in the game, but I was at the game as this is coming from a neutral place. I'm not a Michigan fan. I'll probably out this by talking about JJ and how disappointed I was in his performance, but can he execute on some of these opportunities? Because his accuracy in the Rose Bowl was a major issue, I found. I thought a lot of the big passing plays they did make were schemed open, easy plays to make, and there were a couple of opportunities in that game against Alabama to move the football in the second half where McCarthy had open receivers, namely Roman Wilson, a couple plays that he didn't put the ball in the right spot to create yards after the catch. So we need to see McCarthy executing better and being more accurate all over the field. But again, they might not need him to be that type of, they don't need him to play like Michael Penix needs to play in this game, obviously. I think we all know that. We see the status as well with Jabbar Muhammad, who got hurt late in the game against Texas. He's been the best defensive back for the Huskies this season. I believe he got back into the game after the injury. So does he play in this game? I think will be a factor. I think he will play. We always see these guys in the national championship end up playing and being available, but how much do they play and how available really are they? Now, for Washington, what I would like to see, and I would potentially could see in this game, is the way they be more disruptive is against the pass and against McCarthy is generating pressure and turning those pressures into sacks. We saw a great game from Braylon Trice against Texas in the Sugar Bowl. 7 pressures, 2 sacks in that game. McCarthy, though, did not see a ton of pressure against Alabama. And on the season, Washington has not been a team generating a lot of sacks. They're 118th in sack rate. So, look, I see a lot of ways for Michigan to be able to run the ball effectively, hang on to it, dominate time of possession, and quite frankly, that's what you got to do when you're playing this Washington offense, which I think we need to get to now. What are you going to expect with this Washington offense on the field? Michigan, we know. I think you're silly if you're not saying this. This is a Michigan team that has not seen a passing offense anywhere near the level of this Washington offense the entire season. Haven't seen anyone like it. You could talk about Ohio State. Kyle McCord is a member of the Syracuse Orange right now. I think that tells you what you need to know about how good Kyle McCord is, that in the transfer portal, it's Syracuse that he lands with. You look at another passing offense they play, the second best is probably Maryland. The numbers tell you this is a great defense against the pass, but I don't think they've been tested to truly prove that. And that's what makes this such an interesting game, is because you're looking at a Michigan team that looks good by the numbers, but when you go up against Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, and Rome Odunze, what kind of answers will you have? But getting a little bit away from that before we get into a bit of the passing game, Dylan Johnson's status in this game. He got hurt in the matchup with Texas. Heard the team saying that it was an injury that he had kind of been dealing with and re-aggravated, an injury with his foot. I'm being told he's going to play in this game, but again, I'm forgetting now, the TCU running back heading into the national championship, he had gotten hurt and he did not play in that game despite the team saying that he'd be available. Do we see the same thing here with Johnson? Because again, the short turnaround, 1 week to get back to this game, I'm not so sure he plays. And I don't think I thought Washington ran the ball far too much against Texas, who was really good against the run. I don't think Michigan's quite as good as Texas is against the run. Still a great unit against the run. It's definitely going to be Penix and this passing offense that they lean on. And what I like for Washington when I talk about the offense is done an excellent job protecting Michael Penix this season. Because if you look at the way this team operates, this is a team that wants to push the ball downfield a ton. This offense has the most intended air yards in the country this season, but they rank 40th in pressure rate allowed. Like, this is a team, like I'm saying that because 40th being good, because they like to hang onto the ball so they can push the ball downfield, but they don't give up a ton of pressure. And the sack rate, 2.4% on the season, the 4th lowest in the country. I don't think Michigan's replicating their performance against Alabama when it comes to those tackle for losses and those sacks that they had in that game against Jalen Milroe and the Alabama offensive line. But how many big plays can we get from Derek Moore, from Josiah Stewart, from Jalen Harrell? Can they get a couple sacks onto the board here, pushing this offense back behind the chains and getting those couple stops? Because again, I think this is a game with very few possessions, and if you get a couple stops here, we're talking about that's a significant thing here with the way I think this Michigan offense can kind of dominate in having the ball and moving it on the ground. Now, let's move to what I talked about earlier when it comes to the secondary for Michigan. How good of a unit is this? If you talk to Michigan fans, and I've talked to plenty of them, they love their defensive backfield. They love Will Johnson. They've gotten good play from Rod Moore, from Mike Sainstrill. They really like this group in the secondary, which is one that's seen a lot of turnover from last season and a couple of guys heading to the NFL. But the number one pass defense in EPA per play, so definitely a good passing unit, has been all season. But again, we go back to not being trusted, and you look at what, if you're being nitpicky, which I think it might be a little bit unfair, but I do want to get this number out there to you guys, is if you've seen this team get beat, it's been by giving up big plays, which they didn't do in the Rose Bowl. Jalen Milroe, the passing offense, did not push the ball downfield whatsoever in that game. You look at what we see here with this team, and they rank 81st in completion percentage allowed on passes of 20-plus air yards. So they can give up the big play. It's possible. And we're not matching up against Jermaine Burton and Isaiah Bond. This is Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk. This is a completely different monster here we have. And Penix has been the best deep ball passer in the entire country. He's completing 44% of those passes, and he's attempted over 100 of these passes on the season. Rome Odunze has been dynamic downfield. We saw Jalen Polk in the Sugar Bowl look terrific on those downfield plays as well. Both these guys catching about 50% of their targets of 20-plus air yards. Really going to be tough to defend. And I think we're going to, again, it's tough for me to give these answers because I just truly don't know how good this secondary is without the test. That's what makes this so fascinating, but it will be the difference maker in this game. 100%. If Washington's not hitting these explosive plays, then I'm 100% positive that Michigan is winning this game because, again, that is the way that this Washington offense operates, and that's what these guys do. So huge here of generating pressure and seeing if these guys can hold up in coverage. Now let's talk about some player props. We'll use props.cash to help us do so, and then I'll get to my pick in this game. Now, a few things I'm looking to. We talked about it ad nauseum here. Blake Corum over rushing yards. I love this play. I had this, this was earlier listed at around 93.5. It's since been bumped here early in the week. He's listed at 101.5. Now, you look at the data here from props.cash. He's only gone over this number once in 14 games this season. That tells you, if you're just betting based off what he's done in the season, you're like, wow, he's gone under in 13 to 14 games. He's going to go under again. Well, the thing about using props.cash is I don't solely go off of the trends. I also see, look at this line, the way it's set. Look at what he's done in the season. There's got to be rhyme and reason why this number is set the way it is. And I think the time off has really treated Blake Corum well. He's put up a ton of touchdowns. Haven't found him to be a super explosive runner this season or has run the ball super effectively. I think he looked a little bit more explosive and had a little bit more of the juice in that game against Alabama. I thought so on that touchdown run in overtime especially. Kind of looked different. And we talked about as well, there's a reason why I think it's priced like this. Washington's run defense being terrible. We talked about that earlier and where they rank in the country. I think this team will be able to move the chains and just kind of churn the ball on the ground quite a bit here to keep this Huskies offense off the field. And we also saw in the semifinal, Dylan Edwards, a little bit underwhelming, didn't get the ball nearly as much. It was a lot of Blake Corum and not a lot of Dylan Edwards. And I think we'll see that in this game as well. As this is a game here to win the national championship. Let's get our number one back on the field as much as we can. So like his over quite a bit on the rushing yards. And then as well, this has been a moneymaker for me for the last 4 weeks that Michigan's played. I bet it. We talked about it in the video for the semifinal. I bet it in the conference championship game. I bet it against Ohio State. Blake Corum, 2+ touchdowns. Like, this is a machine. He's a machine on this play. 10 of 14 games this year, he's scored 2+ touchdowns. You shop around a couple books. I saw FanDuel plus 110. Saw Bet Rivers at plus 160. Plus 160 on 2+ touchdowns is what you want to bet. He's also gone over this number in 6 straight games, again, with a 2+ touchdown. So love what it looks like in terms of the trends here at props.cash, but also just knowing the matchup. I expect Corum to find the end zone a couple times in this game. Love this spot here to keep running with one that's just been cashing at a great rate this season. It was plus 260 in the game against Bama. We get a higher total here. Price comes down a little bit, especially with him still doing that with a receiving touchdown in the Rose Bowl. So love Corum to go for 2+ touchdowns there. Last one. I wanted to make sure we talk about something on the Washington side. And look, when at first glance, Rome Odunze was one that stuck out. If we played him in the semifinal, he went over. Go back to him, and I think he can do it again because, again, we talk about Michigan having some struggles with those big plays that Odunze is so good at hitting. But what I want to do in this spot, again, I think Michigan will just kill this game when it comes to 7, 8, 9-minute drives that just completely kill clock. And much like with Jalen Milroe, I'm not going to say it's going to be anywhere near the same with Michael Penix, but you're just not going to see a lot of opportunities to really rack up those passing yards. So I'm going to go to his under 297.5 pass yards in this one. Pretty significant number, but he has gone under in 4 of his last 8 games. So it is a number that he can definitely stay underneath, and we're looking at him having to go for 300+ in this game. That's something that you just don't do very often. In college football. We're looking at, as well, for Penix. He threw for 430 yards against Texas, and now this number is down 28 yards from what it was listed at for that semifinal game. He was listed at 325.5 in that game, and now after throwing for over 100 yards more than that, He's down to 297.5. And it's because no quarterback has thrown for more than 270 yards against Michigan this season. Look, I don't want to contradict myself. I said to you guys, and it is true, this is a Michigan pass defense. It hasn't seen a quarterback on Michael Penix's caliber, an offense of this caliber. I still believe that this is a spot where you're going to see Michigan give very few possessions to this Washington offense. And honestly, I think Washington can still win this game with Penix throwing under 300 passing yards. But I mentioned that they give up some big plays when it comes to those deep passes, but teams only attempted about 44 passes this season of 20-plus air yards, which ranks 104th in the country. That means 103 teams have seen more passes of 20-plus air yards against their defense. So teams just don't push and press the deep part of the field against Michigan like they do with other opponents. So I'm in a spot here where I do think that we're going to see Penix go under this number. And again, I think you're going to need to see this offense operate perfectly with the amount of opportunities they get. And I'm not willing to bet on that here. I've seen this too many times with this Michigan defense. Now, last one from the player prop side. Rome Odunze, anytime touchdown. Like this one quite a bit. 6 touchdowns in his last 5 games. Did not score against Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game, and also didn't score in their most recent game in the Sugar Bowl. We had Jalen McMillan. We also saw Jalen Polk score in that one. But here's what I like. When you get in the red zone, we see the target rate for Odunze at 29%. And then when you get inside the opponent 10-yard line, he's actually bumped up to a 35% target rate. And with Dylan Johnson's status up in the air for this game, it's going to open opportunities for these receivers to catch passes. If you see as well Washington in a trailing game script late in the game, going to lean in that pass a little bit more as well. I really like Odunze here because I also think when you look at less opportunities for this team to get the ball, you're going to see them lean on those top dogs. And Odunze is that top dog for this offense and arguably is been the best receiver in the country this season. I think he's been better than Marvin Harrison this year and probably deserved that Biletnikoff award, but I definitely think he can find the end zone in this game after not finding the end zone in the last 2. Okay, and finally, my prediction for this game. What am I going to do with the spread and the total? Well, I'm going to stay away from the total here because I do think, as much as I've talked about Michigan kind of taking the air out of the ball in this game and limiting possessions, there still is the chance that Michigan runs the ball so well that they're finding the end zone a little bit too much, like a little bit or quite a bit. And we also see Washington get enough possessions that they're able to keep up as well. Because again, have a lot of questions about whether or not the Michigan secondary is as good as it is. Having said that, though, I'm going to take Michigan -4.5. I'm hoping to find a -4 before kick. We'll see if that comes about. But I think Michigan really controls this game quite a bit offensively. And I think this is the thing that, Washington hasn't quite paid the price for yet this year, but finally does against a very disciplined Michigan team, that the ground game just really, really makes it tough for Washington to be able to execute the way they have been all season. They just cannot make any mistakes in this game. And I think that's going to be tough to be able to do against a Michigan team that's played really well defensively and is coached up very well defensively. So I'm going to take Michigan to cover the 4.5 points. But as always, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section down below, whether you're a Michigan fan, Washington fan, or watching this game as a neutral party. Would love to hear your predictions on this game, your thoughts on this game, the last college football game of the season before we get to our 12-team playoff realignment. Enjoy this one, and we will see you guys on the next one.